Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We hope you're keeping very, very safe and well. Thank you so much for joining us on a Bank Holiday Monday special. And it is, I'm delighted to say, for us here on Last Word on Spurs, our final transfer show of the summer. And you can tell by the bags under my eyes, we've had a really, really long summer on Last Word on Spurs. So once again, Kurt asked me, is it mic issues? No, Kurt, it's just general late word on Spurs these days. You have to forgive me. I know we got started very late yesterday for the Nottingham Forest review. So we are simply trying to beat the record time at the moment. So apologies for that. Thank you so much, as always, for joining us. I've got the brilliant Matty Hayes alongside me for our final transfer show of the summer. Matty, love to be back on Last Word on Spurs. How are you?
I'm all good. Always a pleasure to come on here, and we've had some fantastic guests on the show this summer. I think it's very poignant that we're ending it with the man who on many a deadline day I was hanging on his every word outside Hotspur Way. So it's a pleasure to be on with you, Ricky, and a pleasure, of course, to be on with Paul as well.
Oh man. Already comments going ballistic. Lots of you tuning into us here on Last Word on Spurs. So thank you once again for all of your support. Right, I'm delighted to say this for the final time Last Word on Spurs this summer. On our final summer transfer window update, seeing us out. We've had great guests all on this summer, top tier journalists, and we're delighted this evening. It's once again in that category. We've got the wonderful Sky Sports' very own broadcaster, presenter, Paul Gilmour joins us. Paul, thank you so much for your time. How are you, firstly?
I'm very good, Ricky. I hope you're well. Hope you are good too, Matt. You've all been spoiled this summer. 7 signings already before we even get the deadline day.
I know what you're trying to do there, Paul. You're trying to keep us level and just kind of say to us that you've got 7 already. Don't be greedy, right? Is that what you're trying to do to us already there, Paul?
Don't be greedy. Just whatever happens in the last, just try and enjoy the last week for a change. Yeah.
Paul, like Matty said there, we're used to on deadline day, hanging on your every word, watching you at Hotspur, whether it's been in the rain. It's very rarely been in the sunshine, I think, Paul, wherever you've been now. I think you've always, on many occasions, had to have the raincoat on. And occasionally, I say, we've always gone over to you, and nothing's ever happened. It's absolutely dead, and you're there till after 1 in the morning, Paul?
Oh, pretty standard. That's just the summer one. Never mind January. Yeah, January's it turns into just a survival day, that with that evening deadline. There was one, I think there's been a couple in the last couple of years that have been 5 p.m. deadlines, then mostly in the summer, although not on this occasion. So those are always welcome, but yeah, never short of a raindrop or two.
Absolutely. Listen, I know there's comments already going, cut to the chase. We've got lots to ask Paul about for sure. But I know, Matt, you're probably very keen to ask Matt about that experience of deadline day because, listen, it's lovely having a guest on that is there kind of experiences it, Matt, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only one here who spends every single deadline day from 8 a.m. in the morning to whenever those magical deal sheets run out at usually 1 a.m. I'm sure we all spend that time watching Sky Sports News, and it's always Paul's voice that we're waiting for because he's telling us what we want to know. And like I said, there's not been too much show. I think Fernando Llorente, maybe the last proper deadline day signing that we got done, that went on to do a bit of something at the club. But yeah, it's going to be fantastic to get that insight and to see just how boring it is at Hotspur Way when Daniel Levy heads home.
How is it, Paul, for you? Give us an idea, Paul, what that is like before we get into names. What is deadline day like for you at Hotspur Way? Give us an idea what that's like.
Well, over the years, it's been turning up very early in the morning. Probably one of the first people on site, and then being one of the last people to leave as well. And in between, it's just a case of constantly trying to keep up to date with everything, because I think Tottenham have always been a club, certainly in previous years, have always been a club that like to look around on the last day. A lot of clubs do that. They'll try and see if there are any bargains about, or see if they can, I would say push their luck a little bit. But yeah, they'll always try and make something happen. But of course, it's a selling club is obviously will see that coming, and that's why a lot of the times those deals don't get done. But we have seen our fair share of excitement down the years on deadline day, not necessarily at Tottenham, but at other clubs when big deals do get done. So I think it is always one of those days that you do have to expect the unexpected. And even though if you've had, especially with Tottenham, I've had some windows, it hasn't always been as exciting on that final day. You just never know. And I think that's the beauty of what deadline day is about.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, before we get into transfer news, everything that's to come, I just want to ask you, Paul, listen, Spurs have made a real solid start to this campaign so far. We've seen 10 points out of a possible 12? I know there's that ongoing debate at the moment with regards to the styling and the way Spurs are getting the job done. But for you overall, listen, Spurs beating Southampton, Wolves, Forest, and drawing at Stamford Bridge. What have you made so far as Spurs' start to the campaign?
I think solid, but not spectacular. Performance-wise, I know there will always be people focusing in and thinking, it should be 4 or 5-0 every game, play great free-flowing attacking football, especially with the attacking talent in that Tottenham side. But it's solid. It's a really solid start, and I think what we're seeing with Tottenham is Antonio Conte. We're starting to see an Antonio Conte team. If you've watched Antonio Conte teams down the years, whether that be Inter Milan when they won the league, whether that be Chelsea back in 2016, 2017, whether that be Juventus, a lot of characteristics the same, and those characteristics are that there's a real togetherness, there's a real organisation. The fitness goes without saying, and how much those players are made to run under Antonio Conte. But there's a clear plan, and crucially, that's what I think should be most exciting for Tottenham fans this season, because Tottenham fans have spent years crying out for a trophy, or wanting to be in, whether it's going for leagues or whether it's in the closing stages of cups. And I know there's an element of luck involved in the cups as well, but they want to win a trophy. And Antonio Conte, his plan is to do that, and is to put the team above everyone else. And as long as there is a plan in place, and that's what he has, and he's got his depth in his squad, and there might be more to come depending on certain circumstances, and we'll get into that, I suppose, as we go on. But I think it's been a really solid start, and I think it'll get better, because I'm noticing a real resilience about them. They're not a team that, looking at some of the games so far, I think that a game at Nottingham Forest, that could have been in previous years a really difficult afternoon for Tottenham, because it's a newly promoted team with a real lively crowd behind them, and yet the way that the team dealt with it just kind of felt, although the performance wasn't, I think, as Harry Kane alluded to after the game, there will be many things they need to work on and improve on tactically, and the way they're playing. But it didn't feel at any point they were going to be massively in trouble. Yes, you could say a team with a more prolific striker, or maybe one of the top 6 teams would have caused them more problems. But I think the nature of those big 6 games when they come up against each other is, when Tottenham come up against a Man City or an Arsenal or a Chelsea or a Liverpool, whoever it may be, they lift their game anyway. But certainly the start of the season feels like, really, really solid. I think there's a lot to like in the team so far.
I think what the kind of best word we can put in it, like you say, with that game against Nottingham Forest, that in different seasons, in seasons gone by, it would have been a little bit different. It's anti-Spursy, which is a word that obviously Tottenham fans have grown to really hate. But just like the way we're grinding out results, it was the start of the window was the very same. And I think a few Tottenham fans on Twitter have maybe started to forget just how quickly we got a lot of business done early in the window, Paul. But could be a few more, and maybe that's kind of taken the focus away from what we have got done. But with 6 new players added to the squad for this season, Destiny Udogie as well, coming in from Udinese before returning back to the Italian club on a season-long loan. We've had Perisic, made a couple of starts, but Yves Bissouma, Richarlison, Clement Longley, Jed Spence, and Fraser Forster, who as of yet are still really haven't got into that first team and made a mark for themselves. But that aside, what have you made of the business that Tottenham have already got done this window?
Good for many reasons, because I think the fact, and we said this, someone's turning off the lights behind me, last one out of here tonight. But yeah, I think that's usually what it feels like to be at Tottenham's training ground, by the way, on deadline day. And the last one out. But yeah, I think the fact that they got, we said this, I was at the Norwich game, last game of the season, and I remember we had to do just an update outside Carrow Road the next day. And we said that, they were going to make 6 or 7 signings. Antonio Conte, this is what he wanted. He wanted the majority of the business done early. He wanted a shift in policy as well, not just, young players for the future, but also players ready in the moment to come in and compete. And I think there's been a compromise there. So if you look down the checklist of what Antonio Conte wanted and what the senior players wanted, again, we spoke to Hugo Lloris after that game against Norwich, and as much as there was a lot of excitement about qualifying for the Champions League, the minds were already turning to next season. That was what struck me about that Norwich game. Both Conte and Lloris said, this is the time to show ambition. This is the time to go and attack this. The Champions League's coming. this horrendous schedule is coming that I think all Champions League clubs are about to get into over the next few weeks. 5 subs as well. So Antonio Conte wanted to be in a position that he could bring people off the bench and it wouldn't weaken the team. It would strengthen it or keep it, similar to what a lot of the other top clubs do. And a perfect example of that at the City Ground on Sunday with Richarlison coming off the bench. So if you look down the checklist, he's got most of what he wanted. Is it everything he wanted? Well, probably not. I think, as he alluded to today in his press conference, I think still time and patience and maybe 2 transfer windows required to get exactly what he wants. But I think he's been very smart with his signings. I was really impressed with Ivan Perisic because I just didn't think that I would see Tottenham sign a player like that, 33 years of age. But yet he's somebody who's coming in ready to win. And straight away, you can see, I've noticed, like, even in the short game time that he's had on the pitch with someone like, Harry Kane, somebody else at that level, they're on the same wavelength. You can tell that. And so that experience will be vital. Perisic's experience, his winning mentality, all of those things help a team. And I just think they're going to be much better equipped this season. Whether it's enough to actually win anything or whether it's enough to challenge for the league, I think they'll certainly get closer. But the business so far, while not everything they probably wanted, is still, ticks a lot of the boxes that we're kind of we were all talking about at the end of the season.
It's interesting, Paul, because I think, many I think have forgotten how many signings that we made at the start of the summer, only because I feel in the last few weeks on social media, Spurs Twitter, I'm not sure Matty backs me up here, there has been an element of, I would say, frustration, aggravation when you look at maybe rivals in terms of where they are strengthening their squads, and whether when you look at Tottenham's business, whether they've actually done enough to really, really be able to sustain a challenge across all 4 competitions and really see if they can push the likes of City, Liverpool. And that's why, again, it's interesting when you look at, the remaining days we've got now. When this show goes out, it'll be a couple left to go in terms of the window. I mean, between now and Thursday, Paul, what other remaining positions can you see Spurs looking to ideally fill, or will they fill in these last couple of days, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's quite fluid at the moment because there are a couple of things depend. Obviously, it's been much talked about the 2 possible departures, Bryan Hill and Tanganga as well. And if those 2 go, I would expect Tottenham to try and find replacements for them. So in Tanganga's case, obviously a centre back. In Hill's case, obviously one of those kind of versatile attacking players. So I think that's where you could possibly see 2 more come in, but it depends on other things. Now, at the moment, I was told today, as things stand, it's unlikely Tanganga will leave. That always comes with the caveat of, let's see what the final few days in the window bring, because genuinely it is so unpredictable. Things can change, and you'll have heard all the stories in the past about certain transfers and what can go wrong and what can go right and how many things need to come together. That it's still very much up to the air. But as we can only kind of report on a day-by-day basis, I think, when it gets to the stage especially. So as things stand, Tanganga unlikely to leave. So that would suggest, well, no more defenders in. But of course, Tottenham would have to have a replacement lined up if he does go on. The more likely one is Bryan Hill, simply because of his World Cup ambitions and wanting to play regular football. Something he's not really going to get at Tottenham. He's going to be one of those squad players. He's going to certainly be behind Kane, Son, Kulusevski, Lucas Moura, and he's somebody who will play a part. I mean, we've seen him; he's been on the bench. What is it, twice out of in the first 4 games? So he will be somebody who comes into the squad and will get game time. That's in certain matches, especially with the games coming thick and fast. But I think his preference would be to get away, and so those talks with Valencia are ongoing. And if he goes, I would expect to see a versatile attacking player come in his place. The other unknown in all of this, and what we don't know yet, having spoken to Antonio Conte today, I got the feeling this is a real concern around Lucas Moura and this injury and the inflammation around the tendon that he has, and that can be a really awkward injury, and I think it can keep people out for lengthy periods. So if that ends up being more serious than they sort of initially feared, I wouldn't rule out maybe necessarily going into the market anyway to bringing in that attacking player to maybe come in and provide extra cover if Lucas Moura's injury is perhaps a bit more serious. So I think that's why there's so many fluid situations. And yeah, I think most likely would be an attacking player.
How happy, Paul, do you think Antonio Conte is with this business that's been done? Because, look, like we said, everything got done very early in the window, and it seems to have been a demand that came probably directly from Antonio Conte to get those players in early. And the restlessness, I think, in the fan base at the moment is there might have been a feeling there that with the business that we did get done very early, that there was almost an expectation that we would still do business late because we're Spurs and we always try and get something done. But the kind of noise from the club all along after the sixth signing, probably with the exclusion of Destiny Udogie, was that they didn't particularly expect anything more to come in. They were playing down interest in Maddison and a few other players. So do you think Antonio Conte is happy with what he's done, or will he be actively looking to bring someone in, even if someone doesn't leave in the next couple of days?
Yeah, first things first, I don't think any manager's ever completely happy with their squad. I think they're always they would always want to bring one more in, and I think that's the case. They're always looking, and it was interesting hearing them talk today where, I asked him the question about does he expect any more to come in before Thursday, and he said that the club is aware of his opinion and that he's spoken to Paratici, who he knows very well and has worked with, as you all know. So to me, I took that to mean, and that would tally with the information that we have been hearing over the summer as well about, about, I don't think it's finished. No, it's definitely not finished, but it might take a couple of windows to get completely where he wants to be. Now, I know that's not what every football fan wants to hear, but I think in the case of Tottenham, you have to look at the kind of the key signings that they got done early, and that from a coaching point of view, of a manager like Antonio Conte. We speak about Man City. Their strength is being able to, when they need to tweak their squad, and they can just go and get rid of Sterling and Zinchenko and Jesus just like that, and bring in Haaland and whoever else, because they can go out and just get that done. They've got the financial resource behind them, and although Tottenham have committed some money this window, Tottenham's biggest strength is now the manager and the fact that they've got a plan in place behind the scenes with Paratici, and it's very much joined up, and Conte's coaching ability and his ability to get the most out of a system and a team. And it's not about individuals, as of course there's the quality of those individuals. So I think that's Tottenham's biggest strength. And the priceless thing from Antonio Conte's perspective has been he's had the chance all summer to work and to drill that into them and to get them to the fitness levels where they want to be. So I expect any player that comes in before Thursday, if any of those situations we talked about there come off and they bring in an attacking player, I don't expect it to be, I think it's someone who comes in with the knowledge that, they do have Kane, Son, Kulusevski, Richarlison in front of them.
Okay, I mean, listen, that's fair. There's lots of names, Paul, that are coming in, so I think that's where we are going to turn our attention to next to some degree, but in a categorised order. So what we will just do is we will just go for our first break of the show for our listeners that are on audio. For our watching audience on YouTube, we've got a good 600 of you plus here watching us live. So thank you as always for all of your support for Last Word on Spurs on a bank holiday where we're joined by the great Matty Hayes running a superb Spurs YouTube channel. Although, Matty, it's coming to a close, the transfer window. We have to keep changing up that content, of course. And we've got the wonderful Paul Gilmour from Sky Sports, who, of course, will be down there on deadline day, willing us on to see what Spurs can do in those final remaining hours of the window. Just for Paul's sake, we hope the weather does hold up for him. As we asked him in the beginning of the show, he's been down there all sorts of weather, such as the nature of England. Paul, today, obviously, like I say, we've seen some new interesting links to Tottenham. So I think it's interesting to get your thoughts on one of the names that's come up in the last couple of hours, and that's of Yannick Carrasco. Now, I think we knew, according to Sky Sports, back in, I think, the January window, there was reported interest in there from Tottenham. What can you tell us about this potential move for Yannick Carrasco? Anything in that link, as far as you're aware?
Yeah, well, it wouldn't surprise me because the first thing I should say, Jason Bird from The Telegraph reported it today, and doesn't need me to say that, but Jason Bird's very good at what he does. So it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. I haven't had a chance to look into that myself and just get any information I can as yet. But what I would say is that, it was deadline day, actually. It was outside Tottenham. We reported on the day that they had made an approach for Carrasco back in January. So I know that was definitely the case. They were really interested in him. Antonio Conte likes him, and so they did try and get him in the January window. It didn't happen, and so it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if he became one of those attacking players that comes in if Lucas Moura's injuries, maybe they're a bit worried about that, or if Bryan Hill moves on. It's interesting the way that the shift in, what they do. Paratici always seems to have a number of plates spinning, and I think at any one time they could be looking at 9-10 attacking players for that sort of role they want, but ultimately they might only take one. So I think that's why you see so many names, and have seen so many names during this window from a Tottenham point of view, because there is a lot of interest in players, and they're always trying to obviously look for bargains. That's the job. It's a really skilled job. You look at Liverpool and how well they've done it, their recruitment team over the years. So I think it's something that they'll be looking at a lot of players, but naturally they'll have a preference, and I would say Carrasco would be quite high up on any list, given that they tried to get him in January.
Over to you, mate.
Just saying that
Honestly,
comment.
Crackers, one of our own. Crackers was with us last night, just reviewing Forest. Do we need coming for a chance in case he's arrested for keeping up his? That's the typical Crackers line. Love Richard Cracknell, absolute legend. That bloke saving my bacon. God knows how many times in his last 6 months. Mate, let's focus the show over to you.
Yeah, another name that has been mentioned as a potential replacement for Bryan Hill, and it's a player that, to be honest, I've loved watching for years, and that's Ruslan Malinovskyi from Atalanta. Apparently he's dreaming of a move to Tottenham, which is a line we haven't heard very often in recent years, but a nice one to hear nowadays. Now, reportedly, the only club that have made a proposal for the player is Marseille, and that offer was then rejected. He's been a key part of that Gianpiero Gasperini squad in Atalanta in the last couple of years. Do you know if this is a player that Tottenham do have an interest in, if it's one that could be a potential replacement if Bryan Hill does move on?
Well, look, they'll have a long list of attacking players, and the people at the top of the list, the higher up the list they are, is because they can do a lot of keepy-ups. And so the more keepy-ups they can do, the higher up the list they are, just following on from Cracker's point there. So if Malinovskyi can keep the ball up more than 3 times, he's got a chance. But no, I think he's a player of interest, and I think there's whether it's enough to, on a serious note, whether he is high up that list, he's certainly one of interest, but he's I think also that there's a good chance of him moving on, because it feels like his time at Atalanta is coming to an end. I know the manager was quoted about not being too happy with his goal return, and he himself is sort of agitating for a move away. Whether that's to Tottenham, I think it's one of those ones that we have to keep an eye on between now and Thursday, because again, and I could say this with any of those players, with the Dan James, I know St. Maximin's mentioned, but I think that one's too ambitious. I don't think Newcastle would be willing to sell him. If they did, it would be ridiculous money. And Adama Traore is the one who won't go away either. And again, with his contract running down, there's always a chance, and he's good Premier League experience, so he will be quite appealing as a good squad player for any top 6 club. So there all of these things come into it. Contract length. I think Malinovskyi is 29, so again, good experience. So Tottenham have shown they're not afraid to bring in kind of those more experienced players if it helps Conte out with what he wants this season.
I just wonder, Paul, you mentioned about the age there of Malinovskyi, but are we in different territory to what we've been in under other different Spurs head coaches, managers, where there's always been an element of Tottenham where they've tried to, of course, buy young and normally steer away from an older head? I mean, I think when we signed Llorente and you were down there, Paul, I think at that time for when Spurs did that transfer on deadline day, there was a real element of surprise that Spurs went for somebody that was around that 38 bracket, because it was just so unlike Daniel Levy and Enoch really in the 20 years they've been at the helm. Should we maybe just take it as a green now that essentially we shouldn't be writing off the ages? It's now really based on what Conte wants and the experience they can bring to that squad?
Yeah, I think it'll be a compromise, because ultimately a recruitment team are saying, sell on value and, everything that comes with that by bringing in a young player. And if the young player's ultra successful and helps your club win trophies, and your team's full of those young players that develop together, well, great, that's fantastic. It's helping. It's a good investment because it's helping win trophies and qualify for Champions League. If it doesn't come off, but the player does okay, you can sell him on for a decent fee. You can't obviously do that when Perisic leaves Tottenham, and when we saw when Llorente left Tottenham. It's not going to be for big money. So those signings are very much the here and the now, and I think that's what managers do value. So even even back then when Llorente came in, not a manager in world football won't value that, an experienced player, somebody who can help. But it's kind of finding that compromise. Yeah. So I do think one thing that Tottenham have shown that they've been very keen to do is back Antonio Conte. But it's not just him, it's strength in numbers. It's Conte, it's Lloris, it's Kane, all of these guys. What we saw last summer with Harry Kane was Harry Kane caring deeply about this football club and wanting to drive something or make some, find a way for them to take action, find a way to compete with the other top 6 clubs or the other 5 clubs, and find a way to get into the Champions League, find a way to go for trophies, and they have done that by first of all bringing in Conte and then backing Conte. And we did wonder at the end of the season, would that happen? We stood outside. I mentioned Carrow Road, I mentioned the training ground, stood outside, but will this happen? Will the backing come? And so far, so good, you have to say. But I get the feeling there's still some work to do to keep them going and to keep it consistent. And I think as we, especially over the next few months, when the games start to come thick and fast, we're really going to see the progress, and if there is any progress on the pitch. And my guess, looking at Antonio Conte teams, is that it will happen. That they already look more resilient, so I already think that they will be able to pull out more results, and try and close that gap on other teams.
You mentioned there that like managers would value the signings of a player like Fernando Llorente. Where do you think Antonio Conte stands on the recruitment at Tottenham in terms of whether he would prefer a 29-year-old in Malinowski or a younger player in Dan James? Because like you said there as well, up until that Friday meeting in Turin after Carrow Road, there was that uncertainty about whether Antonio Conte wanted to be here, whether he would be here for the new season. And one thing I've looked at this summer is that signing of Clement Longley as left centre-back, seemingly as a stopgap, potentially with a view to going and signing Alessandro Bastoni or Josko Vardiol if things go to plan next summer. Do you think Antonio Conte is looking 2, 3, 4 years down the line, or is it just maybe window by window basis?
Yeah, it's a good question, because if you look down the career of Antonio Conte, that would suggest that he wants everything at the moment. They're certainly looking maybe no further than a year and a half ahead, or whatever it may be, because he wants to be set up to win immediately. And I think that's why he's been quite calm so far this season. He seemed quite relaxed, quite happy, that he feels that clearly at the moment this squad has a chance of doing something this season. Now, of course, what could change is that if it come October and there's 4 defeats in a row or 5, that's when a manager like Conte starts to get a bit agitated. That's where he'll want a bit more and a bit more in the transfer market. So I don't always think it comes down to, I think in an ideal world, managers probably have a number of players, like the recruitment team, a number of players that they like, and then it becomes what deals can get done. And I think that sometimes there are circumstances outside the control, whether that be contract situations, the selling club wants too much, the players not really fussed on the move, or it could be multiple things. So I don't think there's any exact science to it, but as long as managers get a player that they like, it doesn't matter which player is it, or from the list of players they like, it doesn't matter which one, as long as it's somebody who can do the job in the system.
Can I ask you, Paul, because you referenced him, and so has Matty there a couple of seconds ago, Dan James. Now, again, for a player that he could very well end up at Spurs before the deadline. There does seem to be a percentage of Spurs fans that would be really underwhelmed about his potential signing. As far as you're aware, has there been an official tentative conversation there with Leeds United about the availability of the player, as far as you understand it as Sky as things stand?
Yeah, I think there's interest. I think what we have been reporting this month is that there is interest, but I also think that again, it's a good example of one of those situations that a lot's up in the air about whether, does he want to stay at Leeds? Do Leeds actually want to sell him? And if they do, is it a price that Tottenham are happy with? Again, I mentioned any attacking player I think coming in will know that they're coming in initially behind Kane, Son, Kulusevski and Richarlison. That's a lot of players ahead of them. And of course, the games are going to be spread out. Of course, there are extra subs, so you would think that there are more game time. I think the key thing for any target or player or any team, any player in the current Tottenham squad is that we have all been used to seeing Tottenham teams with that strong 11, and are those players that play week in, week out. It's almost trying to get out of that mentality, because the other top teams, ask any fantasy football manager what they think of Pep Guardiola, and that tells a story. Look, he's won leagues by constantly rotating and managing the season really well and the minutes really well. But yeah, I think it might be underwhelming. But yeah, if Conte likes a player and Paratici trusts a player, I think Antonio Conte and Fabio Paratici have done enough in their careers that.
Well, even at Tottenham, Paul. I mean, even with the January signings of Kulusevski and Bentancur, I mean, how can you really? I think, Paul. Again, we have to emphasise that, and you will say that as well, right? That if these are players that Conte and Paratici wants, as fans, surely we have to back them, given how much the difference was made in January of Kulusevski and Bentancur, right, Paul?
Yeah, I think it started with those January signings. You're exactly right, and I think so far there hasn't been anything real. Well, mainly because I think a number of the new signings in the summer haven't really sort of settled into the team yet. We haven't really seen Longley or Bissouma. Those players haven't really had a chance to make their mark, and they will. And the games are coming thick and fast. And I think Antonio Conte alluded to it again today that, for example, Richarlison is going to come into the starting 11 in the coming games, whether that's West Ham, whether that's Fulham, whether that's Marseille. He doesn't know yet, but I think the squad is going to start to get utilised in this coming testing period. So I think that will be the time to judge everything, and when the games are coming thick and fast and he's making full use of the squad. And but I think Conte has definitely earned the right to have that backing and the trust of the fan base. And then if things go wrong, that's a time when, obviously, like at any football club and with any manager, there's a lot of scrutiny on them at the very top level.
Another couple of white players that we've kind of already touched on briefly. We have Newcastle's Alan St-Maximin, of course, scored a cracking volley at the weekend, and the winger that I call the modern day Leandro Damião in Adama Traore had that failed loan spell at Barcelona, back at Wolves, and apparently back on Tottenham's radar as well. And we've asked you about these players in the past, but any chance that Spurs will take a look at them, or is maybe any other wide man that we haven't heard mentioned in the press?
I think. So Maximin, I think, is. I personally don't think he will go anywhere this week. I think that's if Newcastle, and they do have ambitions, obviously, to keep improving. And what he did at the weekend, that was incredible. That goal, the technique involved, and what a special player he is. I think Newcastle fans, probably are desperate for him to be more consistent with his numbers, and can he contribute like that more? Can he assist more? But I don't see that. For Adama Traore, it wouldn't surprise me, simply because, as I mentioned earlier, his contract situation, the contract's running down with no sign of an extension, and he's got Premier League experience, and he might be happy with that kind of squad role, because he'll be coming to play in the Champions League, and there will be game opportunities for, whether it's Bryan Hill, whether it's Adama Traore, whether it's Malinovsky, whether it's Carrasco, there will be a lot of opportunity to play football. So it wouldn't surprise me because of the previous interest. Again, that's a similar one to Carrasco. We know for a fact that there's interest in him. So yeah, wouldn't surprise me.
I'll be honest with you, Paul, the Traore one, it was really starting to grow on me in the previous window. That it never happened, and I was disappointed. It's one of those where I'll be honest with you, when you look at the options out there at the moment, and I think like you stressed there, those players that we've been linked with as a wide option, they've got to get in over, Kulusevski, Son, Richarlison. Again, Kane will have to be rotated as well. But you do just wonder. I mean, listen, I look at Adama Traore. He's got Premier League experience. Clearly, there's a player there to be worked on and coached. I think Conte could definitely do that. I know there's that element that, of course, Paul, I think it's widely known that he did turn Spurs down for that move to Barcelona. But do you still feel that, again, with something like that, it's easily forgotten about and you can easily get that player back on side to some degree? Spurs can get over that as a club, despite the fact that the player rejecting them the once, Paul?
Yeah, I think Spurs this season are very different to what's even that short space of time, how much has changed. Champions League football for a start. 7 signings, but 6 are at the club. They've strengthened that squad. They've brought in people like Perisic, Richarlison, Basuma. Real quality there as well. So I think if you're a player at the moment who has a choice to go to a top 6 club to play in the Champions League, Tottenham is a very attractive proposition, and a lot's made of the stadium, the training ground. The club has everything, and the only thing that was missing was getting it right. From a football point of view, and there are finally signs that's happening. So I think clubs go through cycles, teams go through cycles. It just so happens to be that at the moment, this feels like an exciting time for Tottenham, but ultimately they'll need to back it up and start winning trophies to really kind of show that they are the real deal and doing it on a consistent basis as well. So that's at the moment, that to me is very appealing for any player who would. So yeah, I think if for example that interest is revived in the coming days, and Traore ends up being the one that they go after in terms of that attacking position, then I can't see that being a problem again, unless of course there is another place he wants to play football that we don't know about, like what happened before with Barcelona.
Go on, mate. Come in.
I was going to say, just on that point of Weidman, and we're kind of coming to that window where we start to that part of the window where we kind of look back on what could have been, and just the way Ricky was mentioned there, the wide players that we have, it reminded me of the situation with Raphinha. I know he was never exactly close to joining Tottenham, and he obviously had Barcelona at the front of his mind from minute one. But after that move to Spain was complete, I think it was Phil Hay from The Athletic said that Tottenham had actually made an offer to Leeds for Raphinha, and the player himself was a bit tentative about the move because he felt as though Antonio Conte might play him in right wing back, which is a position he played a little bit under Jesse Marsch at the end of last season. Obviously didn't suit him. Do you think Tottenham have, because we have such a certain front three, and arguably the best front three in the league, certainly the second half of last season, do you think it's going to be more difficult to actually bring in quality players up there, because it does seem as though that position is just set in stone at the moment?
Yeah, that was always been the problem for years, hasn't it? With just Kane and Son, and even just Kane, for example. Let's take him as the out and out striker over the past number of years, because you have an elite player of that quality. It was always a bit intimidating for any striker who they knew, because Kane wanted to play. Like when not injured, Kane was playing. He was rarely rested. So other strikers coming in knew that. So there is an element of that, but I also think with if you're somebody like Raphinha, you've got to kind of back yourself to be, he's good enough to go and take one of those attacking positions. And of course, it is true that Antonio Conte has said himself he loves turning wingers into wing backs, because they can feel really comfortable from an attacking point of view. But yeah, not all wingers love the defensive side of the game, so it's always a fine balancing act to find players who can also enjoy that side of it as well. But Raphinha, I think once Barcelona came in, that was always his first choice. I think that he's just always had that love of Barcelona and wanted to go there. Whether there was all that stuff about the wing back, you could see it. You could see Antonio Conte wanting to have as much flexibility as possible, and again, he's just thinking about the team. So it's it's probably one of those situations that Conte wants players to not think about themselves too much, come in and do a job for the team.
I think the only thing missing from that story was pictures of Raphinha back at Rennes with like posters of Victor Moses on his bedroom wall. That would have just capped it off altogether.
Totally agree with that. Absolutely, 100%. What we will just do is we are just going to go for our final break of the show for our listeners and audio. For our watching us on YouTube, there's a good 600, 700 of you plus watching us live on a bank holiday. So thank you so much for all your support. We're joined by the wonderful Matty Hayes and joined also by the great Paul Gilmour, Sky Sports' very own broadcaster, presenter. He'll be down there on deadline day, as we keep on mentioning, breaking any late Spurs news. For anyone tuning in, we have covered the Carrasco link so far. We've discussed the wide men that have been linked with Tottenham throughout this summer transfer window. We will open up the panel at the end to, again, give you guys the option to throw any names that we'll ask Paul and see if he's heard anything about. But before we do, Paul, just in terms of some outgoings at the moment, it looks like Harry Winks it looks like it's imminent that he will complete that season-long loan move to Sampdoria. As we understand it, that's without an option to buy. Maybe curious to ask you, it seems like Harry has really been reluctant to maybe take that move to Italy. Have you been surprised by the lack of Premier League interest in him? And as far as you're aware, was there any real interest in Harry so far this summer from any Premier League sides?
No, I've been surprised because I've always rated Harry Winks. I always think he's a tidy little player, and I think he's somebody who, if you use him in the right way, he can be a real asset to a team. So I was surprised at that, but I think a spell in Italy will do him good. It'll get him playing regularly. It'll get his, I'm not saying his confidence is gone, but when you're not in a team, it can be difficult for a footballer. So it'll get him kind of that momentum back. And I think, I do think that it'll be a good move for him. I think it's the same with Reguilon. I think they're both straight loans with no option. So there's also that incentive that for someone like Harry Winks, who loves Tottenham, there's that incentive that if you go away and do well at Sampdoria, you come back and you have a chance at next season. Can you force your way in? And I reckon he's got that mentality, got that mindset. I've only interviewed him on a couple of occasions. I've always sensed that he's got that, number one, the passion for the club, but number two, that mentality to kind of go out and prove people wrong and show that he can be really useful for this Tottenham squad. So yeah, I think there's a chance for him. That'll be his main motivation. Go to Italy, enjoy your football again, and see what happens next season. Does he suddenly force his way into Antonio Conte's thoughts?
I would hope the same sort of logic would apply to Sergio Reguilon, who looks set to complete that move to similar deal to Atletico Madrid, and with Renan Lodi completing his move to Nottingham Forest today, we would assume that one is imminent as well. Do you think there's any maybe chance for Reguilon to regain that place in the Tottenham team, or is Conte just such a ruthless manager that maybe that ship has sailed?
I think as soon as you have any sort of deal with no obligation or option to buy, then I do think there is a chance, and it just depends on the player. It depends on does he shift the mindset of the manager. It depends what happens this season with Tottenham as well. Do the options that Conte has at the moment at left wing back do enough to make him think they're the ones that I'm going with again next season? Or does another left wing back become available, say, in January or next summer, that he's always admired and loved, or he's worked with in the past, that he trusts, that he brings that person in and over Reguilon, and they try and move him on again. So I think there are I think there's all sorts of options, of course, with loans as well. The thing to remember, it's quite common in loans to have that kind of, although it's a loan for the season, there's always like a break clause in January that clubs have the option to sell players who are out on loan. So there is always a chance that they could be sold as well in January. So that's, I know, certainly, the case with Lo Celso and Ndombele. As much as they're on loan, if an offer comes in for them in January that meets Tottenham's valuation, I think they have the right to break that and to sell them in January. So again, it's there are a lot of unknowns there, but at the moment, certainly, if you're playing at Atletico Madrid, in a team like that, and you're impressing on that stage, who's to say that Reguilon doesn't come back next pre-season if it works out that way and impresses Conte, and all of a sudden that's how football works sometimes.
I'm intrigued to know from you, Paul, from your perspective, how difficult do you think it's been for the players, for Reguilon, for Winks, for Ndombele, Lo Celso, where, again, they've not been in Conte's plans throughout the summer, they've not been on the pre-season tour. How difficult do you think it's been for those players? We understand they've been set separate training schedules where they're not really, obviously, interacting, or they're not really interfering, but they're not part of the general routine schedule of what the first team players would be on. Do you have a view on how difficult that is for those players in terms of waiting for a move psychology for those guys?
It'll be incredibly difficult for players in that position, because they know that they're not in the manager's plans for the season ahead, and that can knock confidence. Different players react to that in different ways. I mentioned some like I'll roll the sleeves up and say, right, I'll show you what you're missing. Others might just think, well, what's the point? It's difficult. It's for that mindset. It'll impact on players in different ways. But what I guess what is slightly different, we've seen in previous windows with Tottenham, that things have been allowed to drift with players who have maybe been in plans but still around the first team squad. And when players know they're not wanted and they're still around the first team squad, it's not always a nice atmosphere. But one thing that Antonio Conte has done is that he has made up his mind early. These are the players that I'm going into the season with. Again, it all feeds back into what we were saying before about the plan for the season. He has got a plan and he is executing his plan at the moment, and that means the players that he doesn't see, he's going to play are told outright, and it's tough on them, but sometimes that's the way, that's just the way it works at a top club. So, or certainly with a manager like Antonio Conte, he doesn't want to be that person who strings people along. He told them early, he told them outright, this is how it is. And, it's given them a chance to go and find different challenges and different moves. And meanwhile, he moves on with the squad that he does want.
Let's say about Matty, over to you.
The two players that I think fit into maybe the category of ones that Tottenham fans, definitely from an outside perspective, maybe feel did just accept when they were put out of that squad that it just wasn't going to happen for them. And it's Giovanni Lo Celso who completed that season-long loan move to Villarreal, and then Tanguy Ndombele, who went to Italy to join Napoli on loan with that one with the option to make it permanent. Do you think that the structure of both of those deals makes sense for Spurs? I think the buy option for me for Ndombele is a fantastic addition in that. And as a side question as well, in your opinion, who's been the biggest disappointment of those two?
Yeah, well, both came with such big, expectations. They both came with great reputations. You look at that option to buy on Ndombele, and it's 30 million euros or something like that, and you compare that about what the deal was at the time and how much excitement there was around him as a player. That feels like a huge blow. But again, how many examples of that are there right the way through football? I think it's one of those ones that you almost, as a club, just say, look, it belongs to a different era. It's all about looking forward and trying to give Antonio Conte what he wants. And the problem is when a manager doesn't want, someone who was a record signing at the time. I think it was 54 million from memory.
Yeah, it was.
Yes,
yeah.
Yeah.
Although we've tried to eradicate it from our memory.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. I'll take that back then. I'll take that back. But it's sometimes that can happen in football, and again, it feeds into the signings that have been made since. So going back to January, what you were saying earlier, Matt, the January signings, and then of course the summer signings. At the moment, they're all looking like they're, really well thought out. If you think about, Kulusevski and Bentancur came from Juventus, and especially in Italian football circles, Conte and Paratici know obviously it inside out and know they'll know people who know the characters of players. They'll have. I'm not saying homework wasn't done before, but I'm saying this is what it is at the moment. They're doing their homework on new signings. They're making sure that they fit to the plan, and that's something that hasn't always happened. So I think it's disappointing, because I think when there are fans of any football club and your team brings in a Lo Celso or Ndombele who come with great reputations, you're expecting great things, you're excited, and when it doesn't happen, there's obviously that disappointment. But yeah, I think in terms of the deals, similar with Lo Celso there, loan for the season. There's no option, but of course he could be sold in January with a break clause. But Ndombele can go for 30 million euros if he performs. But yeah, I think that's just part and parcel of football, and if it just hasn't worked out, has it?
No, hasn't, unfortunately. What I will just quickly do, Conte, we've got about 10 minutes or so left of the show. Guys, feel free if you want to throw any names at us. We'll interrogate Paul on if he's heard anything at all in these final 10. Paul, one of the names that there still seems to be some, an element of unsurety about whether he'll be here or not between now and Thursday, and that is of Pape Matar Sarr. We saw reports from Sky Italy today suggesting that Spurs are looking to keep hold of the player due to Rodrigo Bentancur suffering a blow to the head, which may have obviously incurred at the weekend in Spurs' win against Nottingham Forest. From your understanding, Paul, as things stand now, and again, we'll have to emphasise, we are recording on Bank Holiday Monday, and lots can change in the transfer window. What's your understanding on the stance of Pape Matar Sarr at the moment, Paul?
Oh, sorry, just cut out there. Can you hear me?
I thought that was a deliberate cliffhanger, Paul.
Yeah, let's go with a Sarr cliffhanger.
Literally.
I think that is. I think that those reports are accurate. Yeah, we heard that today. That Bentancur, and not only that, but Oliver Skipp, although he trained today, back with the first team, and that's great news. It's come at a time when they still don't know how he's going to react and the recovery and how that goes and everything. So it sounds like, as things stand, Sarr is going to stay and become extra cover in the squad. Of course, again, that always comes with the caveat of what happens today and what's said. And today there might be a meeting later in the week. It's decided somehow that cliffhanger. Yeah,
we're not solid cliffhanger.
Cliffhanger guarantees 20 goals a season. He'll be brilliant for you. He'll work really well with Harry Kane.
Poor Richarlison still can't get a start.
But yeah, I think that is accurate. Sarr, as things stand, is I think could be part of part of that squad and being backup.
Okay, no problem at all, mate. Let's hand over to you, and then, like I say, we'll just go through some of the answers that we've had, or some of the questions that we've had to put towards Paul.
Will I go to the chat now, or do you want me to get the last question, the difficult question?
Should we do the difficult question first, get out of the way for Paul, then we can open up to some of the questions that we've been asked?
Keep them easy. Keep them easy.
I always love asking this one at the end of the show. I think this is a special time to ask it, Paul, because you can either big Tottenham's business up for the rest of the window and give us a big promo for deadline day in Sky Sports, or you could tell the truth. Finally, how many more players do you think Spurs will be able to bring in before 11 p.m. or 1 a.m. on this Thursday?
No, genuinely, the truth is, I think I could see a situation that one does come in, but again, it depends what we were saying earlier. I think if Hill or the Lucas Moura situation with his injury, it'll depend on that. But at the moment, it's feasible that Bryan Hill could end up a Valencia player, and therefore you can all be excited because there's another attacking player coming in. So I think, I could see another one before Thursday.
One, okay, fine. Listen, Paul. Let's. We've had a couple of questions come in, and Matt, you feel free to see if any other I've missed out here. So Simon McClaw says, just for his own personal sanity, can you give him some confidence that Amrabat is definitely a dead deal and will not be joining? Is that hard to do?
Amrabat, I think deal agreed, 40 million. It's not happening. It's not. I think I can say that without. I haven't checked with anybody. I can safely say that that's not happening.
There you go. At least Amrabat's come out. You've got that as a confirmation. Matty, anyone there that we've missed out at all? I'm trying to see if there's any actual genuine questions of players.
There's one mention there from Thor Thomason. It's a name that's kind of been floating about through the window, and that's Ilya Zabarny, the defender from Ukraine.
Oh, by the way, I like him a lot. He's a good player, very good player. I've seen Ukraine a couple of times, and in both, there was a game against France that he was brilliant in. I think it was at some point in the last year and a half. It was one of the, maybe a Nations League game or a qualifier or something. But I think he was excellent, and he's really well thought of. Speaking to people involved in the Ukrainian national team at the moment, at that moment in time, there was a lot of excitement about how he could progress in his career, and he was being tipped as a future Premier League player. So whether it's whether it happens before Thursday, I've no information on that at the moment in terms of that, if there is any current interest or that, so I can look into that. But I know he's really well thought of in football circles.
Okay, I'm just seeing some other names here. Matty, I said there's a few that's more coming, so we'll just kind of do it in ascending order. So Paul Zaniolo is a name that was linked with Spurs during the window. Now we know that, of course, he did suffer an injury. Do you think that puts to bed any chance of a move between now and deadline day?
It probably does, and also I think I vaguely remember something about maybe Mourinho not necessarily he was really fighting to kind of keep hold of him. So I think, I don't think so. But again, it's one of those ones we can just do a bit more, because I think what tends to happen from my point of view anyway is once we get closer to deadline day itself, it's just we're sort of just trying to make a few more calls and find out about players who have been, there have been interest in, but will have gone quiet. So he's one of the ones that we'll try and find out a bit more on.
One that I think fits the same bill would be that of the interest we had in James Maddison.
Yeah, I would be surprised if Leicester allowed Fofana and Maddison to go in the same window, especially if Tielemans might be off soon as well. So I would be really surprised if Maddison came to Tottenham. You can never rule anything out, and especially if there is money there to buy players. But I think my gut feeling on that one is, probably not.
I know one that has been linked, Paul, and this is why I know you said earlier Tanganga unlikely to leave as things stand at the moment. I must stress unlikely to leave as things stand. It is only Monday here, by the way, so if you listen to this on deadline day, don't bother. I say, don't listen back to this on deadline day. So I'll take listen back to our last word on Spurs show. Believe me, it will be. Inside Spurs is there. I think there was a reported link to. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is Ashley Phillips of Blackburn, young centre half. Parachi reportedly went to go and see him play against Reading, I think a week or so ago now. Anything you've heard? I mean, I would assume, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, if Tanganga was to leave the club, I can't imagine Spurs going for a big centre back because, again, limited game time. Do you reckon it would be an upcoming player that would be predominantly, there if essentially it has to cover the team?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. It's similar to Brian Hill. If there is a departure, whether it is Hill or whether it is Tanganga, the replacement to come in will likely be someone at that squad status. So would again a younger defender, and also I know at the end of last season there was some talk about. I haven't checked on this recently actually, but balancing up the for the homegrown players and getting the balance right there. So again, that would it should be like for like, but I just need to check on numbers to see if that makes a difference. And if they do bring someone in, does it have to be, ideally a homegrown player?
Okay, Matty, we'll swing it back over to you. I'm conscious that I did say we'll invite questions come in. Then we get 1,000 names we're trying to rattle through. I'm conscious of time for Paul. Matty, let's go to you. Then we'll do a couple more. Then we'll, like I say, call it a night for Paul's sake.
I'm trying to find more names. Alex Scott from Bristol City is another that's mentioned there. Again, I would assume in a similar vein to the Phillips deal.
Yeah, any of the young sort of young players like that. And I know I'm just looking. I was trying to look through because I knew Ashley Phillips' name. I knew he had some information. It's actually you'll know on this show Lyle Thomas, my colleague. He mentioned Ashley Phillips earlier this month actually. So I'm just looking through Lyle's notes on that, and he said that it would be one for the Spurs youth team or to be loaned out if he was to move to Tottenham. So yeah, again, actually, there will be we're seeing it at Chelsea at the moment as well, a balance between players for the here and the now and players for the future, and looking at young talent as well.
Okay, I think we'll do two more. I'll ask you one, then Matt, you can ask you a final one. We've seen Janice Hudson ask about Cody Gakpo. Now, I think we've seen links to Everton today. United were reportedly interested in him earlier in the summer. Anything you've heard there, Paul, with regards to any late move for Spurs for Cody Gakpo?
Actually, no, that's a new one to me. I haven't heard that. I haven't heard him linked with Tottenham at all in terms of anything we're hearing from our own contacts. But again, that's one I can look into. But obviously, real interest from Manchester United this summer. At one stage, I think in the window they were looking at Antony and Gakpo. So I think whether it's now realistic that both do come off, but I think they could easily have found room for both of them. But certainly because of that, and the fact his name is around so often, it might mean that there's a lot of interest in him, but also it could mean that his agents may be pushing for a contract extension. So that's one we can look into.
Okay, great.
I think we have a good one there to finish off on. I feel like Ricky might be giving me a hint with the comment on screen. But we have Alex asking here about Wilfried Zaha. Is I think one that Tottenham fans are getting very, very excited about with the admittedly few rumours that have been out there in the last couple of days. But is this one you can see Spurs completing before the end of the window?
Do you know what? Obviously for the last few windows now, we've heard, and there was the whole saga with Zaha in one of the previous windows, and that seemed to settle down. But he's 29 now, but he is somebody, as we saw at Anfield, the goal he scored against Liverpool, and the real immense quality. So no wonder there is excitement about it. But again, it would probably cost. I'd need to remind myself how long's left on his contract, because obviously that will determine what kind of price Palace will want for him. But I can't imagine him being cheap, and that's the only thing with that. And I'll tell you what, if you could add him to those attacking players you already have, that would be exciting. So I can see why it is exciting, but I just need to remind myself of what the contract length is. And
Danny Kyriakou saying a year left. A lot saying a year left, 12 to 18 months left. So
yeah, so it's getting to that.
You wonder.
Yeah, it is getting to that point where a club might be able to, and I know he's been there's been Chelsea interest in the past, but it might get to that stage that 1 year, whatever, 18 months left, whatever it is, that's getting to the stage where you could, Palace might just be looking to cash in.
Yep. Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure. The interrogation is over, and you are, like I say, the final member of the wonderful journalists that cover Spurs all around the world and the UK and the press conferences as well. Thank you so much for all your time. Like I say, final summer transfer window review, guys, there for you. It's been a busy summer. We've had some wonderful guests, and like I say, we've been joined by the brilliant Paul Gilmour from Sky Sports News. Paul, where can everybody find out how they can check you out on social media? Where can they follow you for all the latest Spurs football transfer news coming their way in the last few days of deadline day?
It'll just be the Twitter account. It's at Sky Sports Paul G. But also on deadline day itself, we contribute a lot of analysis and just little bits and pieces from the training ground in our transfer centre blog, which will be massively all over the app on Sky Sports. Amazing,
Paul. We've loved it, Matty. I know you've been constantly, like I say, you've been at it all window. Matty, where can everybody find what might be coming their way in the next few days? Matt, if there's any late news, will you be across it? I'm sure you will be across it, Matty. Any late news?
God, if we make a signing, I'll be live streaming for 6 hours just talking about how this player I've never heard of is the greatest ever to wear the Spurs jersey. But there may be a bit more kind of realistic analysis as well if Tottenham do manage to get something over the line. Matt Hayes Tottenham blog on YouTube or Matt Hayes THFC on Twitter.
And I've got to say, Matt, thank you so much for all your time throughout the summer. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on Last Word on Spurs for so many of these summer transfer shows. I know lots of people will be asking, Matt, if you watch your channel from here. Does that mean you'll still do 6 hours on Dan James if that gets confirmed, Matt, just to confirm?
Oh, unequivocally. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm going to hold you to that, Matt. Side paper by law now, I tell you.
That's two reasons now why I hope we don't sign Dan James.
There you go, another reason as to why. But Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Guys, we are back with you later than usual. He normally does post-match reaction straight after games. We're back with you on Thursday evening for a West Ham review and a deadline day special. And like I say, we've got some wonderful guests coming on Thursday evening for, like I say, that West Ham review, deadline day special. You ain't going to want to miss it, guys. From Paul, from Matt, please, as always, keep safe, keep well, and as always, come on, you Spurs.